Before we begin, I'll ask Councillor Cal MacLean to lead us in prayer. Mr. MacLean.
Lord our God, we give thanks again to you for this opportunity of coming into your presence. Help us to realize to whom we come. We come before a God that knows us better than we know ourselves. Our very intentions, our very hearts are known to you, and whatever we come with our lips, we realize that our hearts are what the Lord looks upon. And we give thanks that we can come at all, and we give thanks for the opportunity of coming, even this evening. Bless us and bless those who we think of the convener who is to preside over the meeting today. We ask that you would be with him, be with the officers who have done so much work to keep the council going during this virus that is affecting us. We ask that you would remember us all, and remember those particularly down in Uist who are affected by it at this time. We ask that you would be near to them and bless them. Bless those who have been hospitalized or who are in their own homes. We think of others who have been affected in some way, those who have been looking for treatment for, it may be cancer, and have been, these appointments have been cancelled, and others who are waiting on appointments and these have been put off for the moment. We ask that you would be with them, O God, and remember all who are affected. Remember our schools as well. We give thanks, O Lord, for those who are responsible for our schools and our schooling. We be with them at this time. Remember those who are in care homes, who are especially affected. We ask that you would be near to those who cannot see friends or relatives. Lord, we sometimes are confused and surprised at what is happening, but all things are done, and you know about them all. And we come, O Lord, to you, who is able to help us in these times of trouble. Be with our legislators as well at this time. Remember them both in Holyrood and in Westminster, who have to make decisions on these matters which are not easy. And, O Lord, help them to look to you, the God who is able to deliver us. You delivered many in days gone by, and you're able to do that at this time. Be with us then as we deliberate over these matters. Give us the right attitude to do these things, and help us to do things that would be correct and helpful to our community. Go with us and keep us. We ask all for Jesus' sake. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. MacLean. I'd like to ask Derek Mackay, Governance and Elections Manager, to read the Sedierant. Mr. Mackay.
Convener.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Waterstryd Eriske agus USGS. Callum McMillan.
I'm here on the hill.
Ian Archie McNeil.
I'm here on the hill.
Donald Manford.
Is here.
Paul Francis Steele.
I'm in here.
Bendevilja agus Uastatua. Roddy Mackay.
I'm here.
Ian M. MacLeod.
I'm here.
Eushan Robertson.
On the hill.
The Herrig agus County Jason Loch. Paul Anthony Finnegan.
I'm sure.
John Graham Mitchell.
I'm here on the hill.
Skirug agus County Two in the Loch. Ronald Fraser.
I'm sure.
Angus Morrison.
On the hill.
Skieran Rue. Norrie MacDonald.
On the hill.
Alistair MacLeod.
On the hill.
Finlay Mackenzie Stewart.
On the hill.
Storm of the Jess. Keith Dodson.
Here.
Ray Mackenzie.
Here.
Angus McCormack.
On the hill.
Charlie Nicholson.
On the hill.
Storm of the Katua. Ian M. Macaulay.
Here.
Neil Mackay.
I'm sure.
Gordon Murray.
I'm sure.
Lochatua. Donald F. Crichton,
I'm sure.
Johnny McKeever,
I'm here.
Carl McLean.
Anna Shaw.
Tyf Shear agus níis, John Mackay. John Mackay. So he's, sorry, John Mackay.
Present.
John Norman MacLeod.
I'm here.
Kenneth MacLeod.
I'm sure.
Kenny John MacLeod.
I'm sure.
30 members present, convener.
Thank you very much, Derek. I think that's a full house. It is recommended that under the terms of section 50A4 of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973, the public, including the press, be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following items on the grounds that exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 7A of the Act would be disclosed. With regard to conducting today's meeting, a reminder of the following points. Please ensure your camera and microphone are off when you are not speaking. I will call on the relevant officer to present their report. If a member or officer wishes to ask a question or raise a point, please do so using the raise your hand function on your device. Please ensure that after you have spoken, you lower your hand and put your microphone and camera off. Your device should be positioned so that your image is clear to the other participants, and please speak clearly and concisely. With regard to declarations of interest, members are reminded of the protocol that you must leave the meeting by ending the call, which will be confirmed by the moderator to the chair. And following consideration of the item, you will be invited back into the meeting by the moderator. Please ensure you are available to accept the invite to rejoin. Moving on now to tributes, and we start off with South Uist and Tirthy Ullanaif staff. Unfortunately, over the past few days, we have seen an increase in the number of COVID-19 cases in the islands, specifically in the South Uist area. I would like to express our solidarity with that community and commend the actions of local individuals, businesses and organisations who have moved quickly to limit the spread of cases. Our thoughts are with all of those who are affected. I would also like to thank the health services for their work in dealing with the outbreak, and Resilience Uist, who are helping many in the community, as indeed our local members. I would urge everyone throughout our islands to follow the COVID rules and deny the virus the opportunity to spread further. I also commend our own care home employees at Tirthy Ullanaif, from Christine, the care home manager, who has been a constant presence at the care home over the previous 5 days, to the social care staff who have managed to significantly limit the transmission of the virus through diligent adherence to infection prevention and control measures. To domestic staff who have maintained the cleanliness of the care home to a high standard, and to the kitchen staff who have continued preparing meals in what are very difficult circumstances. I would also like to thank those staff from Lewis who have shown solidarity in offering to go to Uist to support their colleagues at this time. 100th birthday. I would like to pay tribute to Mrs. Jessie McKeever, who celebrated her 100th birthday in August this year. Mrs. McKeever is from Tulsa, but is now a resident in the Blairgowrie care home. On behalf of the Cora, I would like to congratulate and extend our very best wishes to Mrs. McKeever. We move on now to the minutes, and the first one is the minute of the meeting of the Cora of 24th June. Councillor Morrison, you've got your
Yes,
hand.
Convener, sorry. I was wanting just to come in before we start the business of the meeting. I've noticed that the committee decision report from yesterday's Ordnance Scrutiny Committee seems to be missing off our agenda. It certainly is on mine anyway. I don't know, is it on everybody else's?
Okay, thanks for raising that. Derek and Marina will have a look at that.
Not, it's on mine. Yeah, and if it's not on, can you circulate it? Apologies, Marina's just gone to ensure that will be circulated.
Okay, thanks.
Marina will send that round and people should have it very shortly. Okay, can we move on then to agree the minutes of 24th June? I'll take silence as assent. Thank you. The 21st of August 2020. Councillor Gordon Murray, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Convener. I cannot agree the minute of 1B. As recorded in the minute at item 2, response to recovery and renewal corporate and political strategy 2021-22, I proposed additional recommendations seconded by Councillor Mackenzie. 5 recommendations were accepted by the committee, yourself and the council leader, subject to tidying up and to facilitate an environment of compromise in this area that was acceptable. And according to the minutes that are reflected in this item, number 1 is acceptable, and number 2 on the energy strategy has not been included in the final recommendations, but I'm assured that a strategy paper will come forward in December, mentioned again by the council leader at PNR this morning. And item 4 and 5 were accepted, but Convener, what I cannot accept is a change to my recommendation on the poverty needs assessment analysis. And I don't think that reflects the sentiment that that recommendation was put forward on. And I was of the belief the committee agreed with me on that. So I would be asking you to change the recommendation back to my original recommendation. Otherwise, I'd like it recorded that I cannot agree that this is an accurate minute.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor Murray. I'll ask the Chief Executive if he wants to respond to that.
Well, but very briefly, Convener, I think on the technical point, and I'll pass to Mr. Mackay on the accuracy of the minute, and he has reviewed the recording of the meeting, but the text indicates that I indicated that the minutes of the Economic Recovery Group and regular updates on refreshment of the anti-poverty strategy would be circulated to members. And the minute goes on to say that the convener and leader indicated they would accept the amendment with the revisions suggested by the Chief Executive. So that suggests very strongly that the minute is quite accurate. But I think to be helpful, I mean, the point that was made on the anti-poverty strategy from memory was that I indicated there was a relevant multi-agency group through community planning with which Councillor Angus McCormick is involved, and if he's present at the meeting, he may want to confirm that the strategy was being reviewed on a community planning basis, and it was therefore right that information be circulated to all members. So I think the feeling was the work was already being done. And that makes sense in terms of what's recorded here. But I know Mr. Mackay has reviewed the recording, and perhaps he can comment on that.
Mr. Mackay?
Not much to add to what the Chief Executive said. I have reviewed the recording. The amendment was put forward. The Chief Executive commented on each of these, each aspect of the amendment as put forward, and suggested a number of changes which were accepted by the convener and the leader, and subsequently the quorum. So, in my view, the minute is an accurate record of the conduct of that meeting.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mr. Mackay. Mr.
Convener,
Murray?
can I come back on that?
Yes, surely.
I thank you for these contributions. I remember there was discussion on it. I remember the Chief Executive talking on that. I remember Councillor McCormack making a suggestion, but I do believe that I was adamant that this was the case, that it was needed, required, concerning the situation with COVID. I know that what I have to say, Mr. Budd is an advisor to the committee. He's not the policy maker, so I would like to see that recommendation back. Otherwise, I cannot agree it's an accurate reflection of the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Murray. I'm seeing that Councillor McCormack, I think, may wish to come in on that. Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Convener. I just wish to confirm that the poverty group is indeed reviewing the strategy. It's proved very difficult to do so. It's proved difficult to get people together because they have been so busy enacting strategy because of COVID. But there have been discussions between myself and the two principal officers, one from health and one from education. And a new document is currently being worked upon. And once that has been to the group, which we will try and bring together as soon as possible, it will then happily be shared with members.
Thank you, Councillor McCormack. Can I just ask Mr. Mackay if it's possible to circulate a transcript of that, of the meeting, just so that all members are aware of that, and ask Councillor Murray. We will note the fact that you don't agree that aspect of the minute of that meeting.
Convener, the recording is available on the course website. The full recording.
Mr. Mackay says that the full recording is on the Coroner's website, and I would direct members to that if they wish to explore further. But in the meantime, we will record Mr. Murray's non-agreement to that aspect of the minute of the 21st of August. Mr. Macmillan, have you got a different thing that you want to raise? Your hands up.
Yes, Convener, thank you. The matter that I had looked at was on item 7, that the amendment proposed by Councillors Manford and Murray hasn't made it into the minute of the meeting, and I wondered, was there a reason for that, or is that if that could be explained? It was just something that I had looked at, and sometimes it's difficult to see what's not there. So that's something that hasn't appeared in the minute, other than the motion and the amendment, which was accepted, but not the amendment, which was competent but not accepted. Thank you, Convener.
Can I ask Derek Mackay to comment on that as to why it panned out that way? And I'll ask Mr. Mackay to explain it, and I will hopefully reinforce that once it's finished. Mr. Mackay.
Okay, thank you, Convener. Yeah, during that item, an amendment was moved by Councillor Donald Crichton, seconded by Councillor Calder Macmillan. Motion was then tabled by the convener, seconded by Councillor Alison MacLeod, and the core moved into formal debate. In terms of standing order, all amendments must be moved prior to formal debate starting. The debate had already started when Councillor Manford indicated that he wished to either move an amendment or have a change to the amendment. But at this stage, we were already in formal debate and could not accept any further amendments.
And that is my recollection, and I stated that at the time, that we had gone into formal debate before Mr. Manford proposed an amendment. Okay, can we move on then to the minute of the meeting of the 9th of September 2020? And again, that's for agreement, and I'm not seeing any hands. Sorry, Mr. Callum Macmillan, you put your hand up.
Yes, Convener. At the time of that corolla, I said that this was a meeting of councillors, not a corolla, because it was not a competent meeting, because it didn't comply with standing orders. And I was quite clear on that. And that if this is to be...
Mr. Macmillan, can I just interrupt you? I mean, what I stated at that meeting was there is no such thing as a non-competent council meeting. You either have a meeting or you don't have a meeting. And there was nothing that was not competent about that meeting. And that remains to be the case.
It didn't comply with standing orders, convener. That is the problem. And if it didn't comply with standing orders...
Can I just stop you there and ask Mr. Mackay to speak on that? Mr. Mackay.
Thank you, convener. In terms of the law and practice of local authority meetings, the standing orders from the Local Government Act Scotland 1973 apply to the rules and practice of meetings. I'm assuming what Mr. Macmillan is referring to is the fact 3 clear days' notice as per standing orders were not given. But there is provision within the Local Government Scotland Act, specifically within Section 50 of that Act, I believe it's paragraph 6, which allows in certain circumstances meetings to be called at less than 3 full clear days' notice, where there is a matter of urgency and a matter of immediacy.
Thank you, Mr. Mackay, for that clarification. Can move on then to item 2, which is declaration of interest, and you're invited to declare an interest in any agenda item at this point. If you become aware of an interest during the meeting, then I would ask that you declare it at that time. When declaring an interest, it would be helpful if members could indicate briefly the nature of that interest. This helps to make our decision-making more open and transparent for the public. We move on now to written questions to the convener and chairman of committee. In fact, most of them are to the convener, and the following questions have been submitted. And the first one is from Councillor Ray Mackenzie.
Thank you, convener. The COLA convened on the 3rd of March 2020 agreed to suspend any ongoing action in respect of taking Croft property into consideration when making financial assessment for care charges until such time as the COLA had considered its policy position. Notwithstanding the position presented to councillors on the 6th of May 2020, this policy position to suspend ongoing action is still extant. Why, therefore, is COLA policy as set out by councillors on the 3rd of March 2020 been disregarded when the Scottish Government has confirmed that each local authority must set its particular policy on this issue of taking property taking property belonging to third parties into any computation of assets belonging to any persons in care?
Thank you, Mr. Mackenzie. I'll provide a response to that question. The minute of the meeting of the CORLA on 6th May 2020 recorded that the QC's opinion appended to the report confirmed that the CORLA had no discretion to adopt a policy of excluding Croft property from financial assessment for care charges. On that basis, the Chief Executive lifted the moratorium which had been put in place at the meeting on the 3rd of March 2020 as it was not in accord with legal obligations. The Scottish Government has not given discretion to local authorities to set their own policy on that issue, in which local authorities have no discretion. I also recall that at that meeting, we agreed that we would come back to this issue at such time as it was possible for all councillors to come together in the chamber to be able to debate it on that basis. Do you have?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Move on to a question from Mr. Cal Macmillan. Mr. Macmillan.
Thank you, convener. A question to yourself. can you advise what Cornwall policy is with regard to croft tenancies as statutory conditions regulated private heritable tenancy agreements between individuals and their landlords? And I will have a supplementary question as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Macmillan. And the response is brief. There is no such council policy. And you can now ask your supplementary.
With regard to council finances and Kenman Holdings and the pecuniary nature of any arrangement, could you confirm with the council leaders' involvement in any such arrangements? Thank you.
Thank you for that supplementary. I will not respond to that supplementary. Next, we have a question from Councillor Donald Manford.
Thank you. Tapalai the Complaint. Can you advise, convener, what Cornwall policy is with regard to the permanent improvements to land belonging to the landlord on land covered by the statutory servitude of crofting tenure, whereby the permanent improvements belong to the landlord but are in the heritable tenancy of the tenant?
Thank you, Councillor Manford. And again, I will respond to that. And the response is as previously, and there is no such council policy at this time. Do you wish to ask supplementary?
No, thank you, convener. I'm happy to hear that clarified. We'll assess this altogether. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Manford. Councillor Johnny McKeever.
Thank you, convener. This is to yourself as well. Can you advise what Cornwall policy is to croft intestacy, bequest of croft, the confirmation of the Cornwall as executor while seeking to be the principal beneficiary, and regards given to, or disregard even, to court ruling in matters of guardianship and power of attorney?
Thank you, Mr. McKeever. Again, I will respond to that in the same vein as the previous ones, and there is no such council policy. Do you want to ask a supplementary?
No, thank you. We'll take that on board and discuss it at a further meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKeever. A question from Councillor Kenneth MacLeod.
Thank you, convener. Can you advise what Cornwall policy is whereby the statutory provisions of the Crofting Scotland Act 1993 as amended by the Crofting Reform Act 2007, the Crofting Reform Scotland Act 2010 and the Crofting Amendment Scotland Act 2013 are used for the current practice of selling permanent improvements to croft land and taking monies for assignation of crofts?
Thank you for that, Councillor MacLeod. Again, the response is that there is no such council policy at this time. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, convener.
Move on to a question from Councillor John Mitchell.
Thank you, convener. It's related to the previous one to an extent in terms of quantification. Can you advise the number of permanent improvements that have been affected by the Corla this year since the commencement of the policy? And can you also advise on the amount of monies gathered in by the Corla since the commencement of this current policy?
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. There is no council policy, but permanent improvements to crofts, i.e. houses, have always been taken into account for financial assessments. As at 31st March 2020, there were 18 residents assessed as having croft assets with a total debt against these properties of £337,000. Do you wish to ask a supplementary, Mr. Mitchell?
No, I don't, convener. Thanks for that reply.
Thank you. Move on to a question from Councillor Gordon Murray. Mr. Murray.
Thank you, Convener. Can you advise the number of cases currently operational concerning the Corla recovering monies from assignation of tenancies, selling off permanent improvements belonging to third parties, and the cases where the Corla seeks to be appointed executor of legacies in cases of intestate estate of deceased crofters with a view to being beneficiary, and the number of cases where the Corla is the care guardian and financial guardian?
Thank you very much, Councillor Murray. The response is there are 16 deceased residents assessed as having croft assets with a total debt against those properties of £939,000. It is a matter for the executor to determine how to pay the debt. The Corla has never forced the sale of a croft house to settle a debt. The Court has not applied to be appointed executor in any such cases. Care and financial guardianship ceases on death. Do you wish to ask a supplementary?
Not at this moment, Convener. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Murray. Another question from Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Convener. At the full council meeting of Corlan and Alliance on 24th June 2020, a report on the revenue outturn 2019-20 by the Director for Assets, Finance and Resources was presented for consideration. The recommendations were at 3.1 of the report, and one of the recommendations was as follows. D, agree that the Chief Executive's 2019-20 carry forward of 74,000 and that 26,000 of previous years carry forward be earmarked for the refurbishment of the council chamber. I put forward the following amendment. Agree that the Chief Executive's 2019-20 carry forward of 74,000 and that 26,000 of previous years carry forward be earmarked for use in addressing issues arising from COVID-19 in the local economy. The convener, or yourself, ruled this amendment as not competent based on the advice from the Chief Executive and the Director of Finance. Could the convener tell me in full what this advice was that deemed the amendment not competent?
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Corla standing orders state that a question must be about a relevant item of business not on the agenda for the meeting. This question relates to a procedural ruling and therefore does not constitute a question in terms of standing orders. However, in the interest of openness, I will address the matter. The advice from the Chief Executive and the Director of Assets, Finance and Resources was that the funding had been committed. IT equipment for the refurbishment of the chamber had been purchased, and the recommendation itself was a technical recommendation to move the funding from one financial year to the next. This advice was given at that meeting. And I can further add to that in that a significant amount of other equipment has been delivered into the council premises for the refurbishment of the council chamber as well. Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Murray?
Yes, I do, Convener. Can you circulate the minute where that expenditure on the chamber refurbishment was agreed? I'm sure if that exists, we can have that circulated. Well, I think it should exist, but thank you. That's what I'm saying. Move on now to governance. Item 4. And this is to do with the timetable of committee and quorum meetings 2021 and public and local holidays in 2021. And the report is by the Chief Executive and seeks formal approval for the proposed public and local holidays in 2021, together with the proposed programme of committee and quorum meetings. The draft year planner
for 2021 is appended to the report, and for ease of reference, the proposed local and public holidays are set out separately at Appendix 2 to the report. There is a recommendation for approval at paragraph 3.1 of the report, and Mr. Mackay will answer any questions members may have. Not seeing any hands appearing, so we can take it that that recommendation has been approved and accepted. Item 5, planning application, and this is in relation to a detailed planning application to erect 72 houses with associated accesses, parking, installation of air source heat pumps and other associated infrastructure on land at Blackwater, Newmarket, Isle of Lewis. This report is by the Director of Communities, and it's pursuant to the Cornet Scheme of Administration, as this planning application is classed as a major application under the hierarchy of development regulation. It must be determined by the Cornet following consideration of the Planning Applications Board. The board recommended that the application be approved at its meeting of the 29th September 2020. The minute of this meeting has been circulated and added to Dropbox. As the Cornet does not consider such applications on a regular basis, I would remind members that of our agreed process for determining such applications, and also that they must have taken part in planning training to participate in the decision. And then any amendment contrary to officer recommendations moved by a member must be based on planning reasons. If such an amendment is proposed, the chair may choose to adjourn the meeting pursuant to the timeout protocol. The amendment must be provided in writing before it is the subject to a vote. Members are reminded that a decision which is not based on legitimate planning reasons would leave the Cornet exposed to the risk of legal challenge and potentially significant costs arising therefrom. Maura Ferguson is available to speak to the report and will answer any questions that members may have.
Okay, thank you, Convener. I will take members through a PowerPoint presentation, which we will put on to screen share, ahead of commenting upon key sections of the report and recommendation. The presentation does cover a fair amount of detail in order that members are fully apprised of the detail of the proposal in arriving at its decision on what is classed as a major development. The application is for the erection of 72 houses with associated new accesses, parking, air source heat pump and other infrastructure on a site at Blackwater at Newmarket on the Isle of Lewis. The application is on a site that is already allocated in the local development plan. This establishes the principle of development on the site for housing. As a major development, the site has been subject to, the proposal has been subject to pre-application consultation with the community ahead of the planning application having been submitted to us. For those less familiar with the application site, this slide, this aerial shot indicates the location of the development. It's located on the northern fringe of Greater Stornoway, on the right-hand side of the road, just before you leave the developed area of Newmarket, heading out onto the Barvas Moor Road. If I can take to the next slide. The site itself is bounded in red, extends to over 6 hectares in area, but the area to be developed for housing is that on the left, and that extends to 4.8 hectares. The site slopes from the northwest corner down towards the southeast, with a level change of over 15 metres from the top to the bottom. The site borders the existing Glenthue housing development, and there will be a new vehicular link on the northeast corner to allow traffic to use the existing Glenthue access as a secondary means of access and egress. 2 representations have been received from properties identified as 15 and 16. Those are just to the south of where the cursor is shown on the screen. The concerns of those parties have been in relation to the increase in traffic arising from the link road breaking through at the point close to their houses, and also to the reduction in parking available to those houses as a result of that. If I can take you to the next slide. This next slide shows the proposed development, and if again I could go to that top northeast corner where the parties who submitted representations reside. In response to the loss of car parking there, the developer has included within the proposal, as amended, some additional car parking spaces to the north and to the south of the proposed new road. If I can now just take you down to the main road, a new access would be created onto the main Stornoway to Barbas Road. And as you enter into the development, the housing will be terraced up the slope. And while there will be some embankments which are indicated by the green marks on the between the houses there, most of the level changes will be achieved by grading the slopes. There will be an entrance feature as you enter the development, some landscape features both here and around the small industrial area, which you can see just at the bottom right of your slide. There will also be a viewing area in the northwest corner of the site, and the area identified for surface water drainage through sustainable urban drainage system will also double up as an informal recreation area. There will be 2 new bus laybys created, one on either side of the main road. The proposal is to erect 72 houses. 68 of these will be semi-detached, and there will be 4 detached units. Of the 72 houses, there will be 12 units which will meet enhanced accessibility requirements. The next slide indicates a proposed pedestrian route. And this is the reason that the area of land which covers the existing Newmarket Play Park has been included within the development, the red line boundary of the development site. The pedestrian path is indicated here in green, and this is a possible route, but the finalised route has not yet been finally determined. The pedestrian path would lead to a pedestrian crossing, a puffin crossing, which will cross over the main road. If I can then take you to the next slide. The intention would be for the development to be carried out in phases. The first phase would be that outlined in red. It would comprise the first tranche of housing along with the sustainable drainage system and some of the common areas of landscape. The next phase, outlined in orange, would be the housing, and then the final phase, which would be the higher part of the development, along with the landscaping and viewing platform at the top left of the screen. If I can take you to the next slide. This slide is to indicate the ground level changes between different levels of the site. And this illustrates the change in level between houses 23 and 43. And there's a cross section there that just shows that the floor level of house 43 will almost be at the wall head level of house 23. There will be, in order to achieve a level garden for some of the houses that are on particularly sloping ground, there will be a level area, level garden area, and there will be a small retaining wall, in this case about 0.6 metres, to retain the slope, and then the ground will slope down to meet the ground level at the house below. I can then take you to the next slide. These next 3 slides are to illustrate both the external appearance of the properties and also the schedule of materials. This is a semi-detached unit. There are 10 different house types across the development, and range of materials on these particular plots would be white rough cast with some grey render and small areas of Siberian larch for contrast, and with anthracite windows, gutters and fascias, with grey roof tiles. I can then take you to the next slide. So this one here, again, a semi-detached unit, 1 3/4 story alongside like a single one. This is also illustrative of the change in level between those 2 units. Again, quite rough cast Siberian large cladding, and in this case, green windows. Again, with grey roof tiles. And then if I take you to the 3rd slide, this one being a single story, semi-detached unit. And with these, there would be, again, like quite rough cast grey roof tiles, and this time cedaral clipboard cladding in burnt red. If I can then take you to the next slide, there are a series of 5 photographs here just to give members an overview of the site. This photograph is taken in the top northeasterly corner of the site, and adjacent to the houses where there would be the road would break through into the existing Glenthue development. The additional communal car parking spaces that are to be provided would be in the slocus. I can now take you to the next slide. This is looking along the eastern boundary, looking down the eastern boundary of the site beyond the houses 15 and 23 at Glenthue. And over on the other side of the main road, you can see, like also at elevation, are the houses at Bridge Cottages. I can then take you to the next slide. Again, just looking over the kind of topography of the site, and you can see on the other side of, again, Bridge Cottages and the rear of the small industrial estate, which you can also see on the plan to the left. And if I can take you to the next picture. This is illustrative of the topography across the site, and you can see the fall from the right to the left there down towards the industrial area. And then the final picture is taken, again, this time standing down behind the industrial unit, and is looking towards the play area and back towards the town of Stornoway. You can see the play area just beyond the plant, and a Scottish Water pumping station, and also the road that leads you into Glenthue. That concludes the PowerPoint presentation. If I could just briefly take members to the report. First of all, I would just say that in terms of procedure, the development was subject to environmental impact assessment screening, and it was concluded that it was unlikely that the development would have a significant effect on the environment, and therefore, in this case, an environmental impact assessment report was deemed to not be required. Further, due to the site being located on the boundary of the special protection area for the Lewis peatlands, it was required to undertake an appropriate assessment under the habitats regulations. Again, the appropriate assessment concluded that there was unlikely to be any significant effect on the integrity of that designated site. Planning advice was sought through the statutory and non-statutory consultation process, and the responses are summarised at section 9 of the report, and they are set out in detail in the appendix to the report. Neighbour notification was carried out and 2 representations were received, and as advised previously, these related to properties at 15 and 16 Glenthew and were concerns to do with parking and road safety. The development plan policy assessment has been set out in section 13 of your report. The policy context itself has been set out in section 12. Regard has been had to material considerations in section 14. Material considerations have included Scottish planning policy and the matters raised in representation. Conclusion of the assessment has been set out in section 15. The conclusion is that the development, that the proposed housing site is on an allocation site, and therefore the principle of housing at this location is already accepted by the development plan. The proposal is in keeping with the settlement pattern of the area. It has sufficient capacity to accommodate the housing and the ancillary infrastructure. It's concluded that it would not harm the amenities of traffic, safety, or indeed of neighbours, subject to the revisions that were made to the proposal and subject to the relevant conditions. It's concluded that the proposal accords with the development plan and that Scottish planning policy provides further weight in support of the development proposal. There were no material considerations of sufficient weight that recommended that justified a recommendation other than one for approval. Recommendation is therefore for approval, subject to the planning conditions which have been set out in Appendix 1 to the report. Thank you, Chair, Convener and members. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Maureen, for that very extensive presentation on what is a significant housing development on the periphery of Stornoway, or perhaps the periphery of Bardas, depending on which way you're coming at it from. So thanks very much for that. I'll open it up to. Before I do that, could I just have recorded on the council minute a declaration of interest in that I am a core representative on the HHP, and I declared that interest at the Planning Applications Board, but I would like to have that recorded at this meeting too. So that's okay. Thank you. Any questions? I'm not seeing any. Councillor Callum MacLean, followed by Councillor Paul Finnegan, followed by Councillor Charlie Nicholson, and then Councillor Ruth Mackenzie. Callum MacLean.
Yes, could I ask Maura just a little question on as regards just a very significant housing development out in the Blackwater. It happens to be, if I'm still correct, it happens to be in the Lochathua ward, actually. The recreational area that you mentioned, Maura, could you tell us a wee bit of what's included? Because it is a significant development of 72 houses. It would require a fair bit of facilities or amenity of some description. So could you give a wee description of what's included in the recreational area?
Thank you. The recreational area is basically like a series of paths. I don't know whether it's possible to zoom in on that actual part of the slide. It's on the second slide. I don't know if we can take it back onto screen share. It is like the bottom of the development will have a small pond. I don't know if it's possible to zoom in on that, but there is basically just like some informal paths. Now, in terms of recreation and play space for children, the fact that the development is beside the quite extensive Newmarket Play Park, it was deemed that a play area was not a planning requirement for this particular development. So we are looking at, paths through that particular area, and there is also a link path at the head of the turning head just as you enter the development. If you go to the north, there is a link path that would take you up to the viewing platform at the top there. So that path there would allow people to walk up into that additional area at the back.
Yes, so there was no recreation facilities for children because of the close proximity to the other one. I just reflect on some mainland developments very similar to that, and actually within a development like that, there would be some play area for the children. I'm just reflecting upon what I see in mainland developments similar to that, even although within, and some of us would say that it's within reasonable close proximity, but it's reasonable, it's not right. But in a development like that, I would expect a wee bit for the children.
Do you want to go back to the previous slide, to the one above? And go back to the previous slide. I think it's this slide here. I mean, this slide here illustrates the extent of the Newmarket Play Park, which is run by a community body. But a planning brief was prepared for the site in advance of the planning application, and it was felt that with the pedestrian link that was proposed, that play would be sufficient to service the new development, subject to there being like a small area of kind of informal path network through the development itself.
Okay, thanks for that, Morg. Councillor McLean, are you happy with that?
Yeah, it's just I still voice my concerns about the play area, but that's I see it in many areas in cities and where have you, that the play areas within a development area would have actually another one would be actually the further part of where the play area is at the present. But I take it on board that it's reasonably close, but I still think there should have been some form of play area within such a large development.
Okay, thanks for that. And there is scope potentially for extending the existing play area towards the existing housing development as well. But that's a matter for others to take on board. So thanks for that, Councillor McLean. Councillor Finnegan, Councillor Nicholson, and then Councillor Roddy Mackay-Uist.
Thanks, Chair. It was just to declare an interest, the same as yourself, as a member of HHP board.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Finnegan. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, convener, and I agree with Councillor McLean in regards to the play area. So I don't want to go over that, convener, but within that, since there is a fantastic Newmarket play area there, is there anything in planning where within the laws or the policy that we could encourage expenditure from that development to add to the Newmarket play area since it's close? Because when we look at other developments like Mackenzie Estate, the aspect down there in the play area is just not fit for purpose as such. But here we have a really good play area, and as part of this development, can we encourage finance to be added to the Newmarket play area to add other things, since there is 72 other houses going in, convener?
I'll ask Morag if she wants to respond to that. Morag?
We have not made that a requirement of the planning conditions. The area has been included, and there are ongoing discussions between Tiny Shugal as agents for HHP with the play park. It is quite feasible for that arrangement to be arrived at out with the planning process.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Morag. Happy with that, Councillor Nicholson? Yes.
Thank you, convener.
Councillor Roddy Mackay-Uist.
Thanks. I'd also like to register a declaration of interest in this item as an HHP board member, similar to yourself.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mackay. Any other hands?
Yeah.
So, sorry, Councillor Ray Mackenzie, I think.
Yes, for some reason I don't have the usual raise the hand thing.
That's okay.
Yeah, well, I actually was thinking on the same lines as Councillors McLean and Nicholson, but I think well, you've answered it, so there's no point in me asking it again. But the other slight point I was going to make was to do with the height of the houses, or the, you know, from the top to the bottom. Obviously, there's quite a drop, and is there any danger there of obviously there would have to be adequate drainage? That's obviously part of the thing, but the fact that there's quite a drop there, you know, and there's a half a metre of a wall having to be put in, or whatever it was, would that actually potentially cause a problem of water affecting the lower down houses?
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie Morag.
It should not. There are both details where the sustainable drainage system for the kind of roads and the each individual site requires to meet, first of all, building standards, but it also needs to meet the requirements that are set out in the SUDS manual that SEPA produce. So there are like technical calculations that need to be carried out, and there has already been quite extensive engineering designed in order to arrive at the layout for the sustainable drainage basin that is set out in this plan. Now that will be the detail of that will be further tested through the building standards process.
Thank you, Morag. Thank you, Camina.
Thank you, Morag. I'm not seeing any other hands coming up at this moment, so I will take it that everybody's happy with that. Thank you very much for that presentation, Morag. And can we now turn to the recommendation there at 3.1, which is to approve the planning application subject to conditions set out in Appendix 1 of the report. We agreed? I'll take silence as assent again. Okay, thank you very much. That goes through. Can we move on then to item 6, which is the committee decision reports, and they are for approval of the recommendations in the decision reports. And the first of them is Communities and Housing on the 22nd September 2020. And Mr. Steele, I think you were substituting for Mr. McLeod. Mr. Steele.
Thank you, Convener. I hereby move the decision report of the Communities and Housing Committee of 22nd September 2020.
Seconded by?
Seconded by me, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor McLeod. And there are no much arising to that. Turning to Education, Sport and Children's Service Committee, again on the 22nd September 2020, and Councillor McCormack.
Convener, I move the committee decision report of the Education, Sport and Children's Services Committee of 22nd September 2020.
Thank you very much for that. Seconded by?
Councillor Finnegan, I second that.
Thank you for that. And there is nothing further in terms of that report. Transportation and Infrastructure Committee on the 23rd September 2020, and Councillor Robertson.
I move the recommendations of Transportation and Infrastructure Committee of Wednesday, 23rd September 2020.
Thank you, Robertson. Seconded by?
I second that.
Thank you very much, Councillor McLeod. And again, there is nothing arising out of that. We turn to Audit and Scrutiny Committee on the 29th of September 2020.
Sustainable Development.
Apologies, have I missed Sustainable again? I'm going to get into trouble for that. Can we go back to Sustainable Development Committee on the 23rd September and Mr. Crichton?
Thank you, Convener. I'm taking this personally now. I move the committee decision report of the Sustainable Development Committee that met on the 23rd of September.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crichton, and a very good meeting it was too. Seconded by?
Did you get that, Convener?
Sorry, is that?
Yes, seconded by Norrie MacDonald Skeeter.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And again, there are no matters arising out of that. Turn again back to Audit and Scrutiny Committee on the 29th of September, and Councillor Angus Morrison.
Thank you, Convener. I move the committee decision report of the Audit and Scrutiny Committee of the 29th of September 2020.
Seconded by?
Second that, Ian Macaulay.
Thank you, Mr. Macaulay. And again, there is nothing arising out of that. Turn now to Policy and Resources Committee of the 30th September 2020, and that's just today. And the Council Leader, Councillor Roddy Mackay.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. I move today's Policy and Resources Committee decision report.
Seconded by?
I second that, Councillor Alison MacLeod.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor MacLeod. And again, there are no issues arising out of that committee. We move on then to item 7, which is the Lewis Castle Museum and Archive project. And this report is by the Chief Executive, and the item is being taken in private at the end of the meeting. The report provides details of the proposed arrangements for an audit investigation process into the Lewis Castle Museum and Archive project. It is now considered appropriate that the Chief Internal Auditor recommence the audit investigation which would have been completed into the project and its delivery in 2018 had legal action by Kenman Holdings not been proceeding.
Thank you.